Getting big arms has completely changed my life. I'm going to tell you how they did this and also how I got them. Throughout elementary school, I was skinny fat, I had really bad body image problems, so I wore a sweater all the time. It didn't matter if it was 35 degrees out, I would literally be wearing a sweater, sweating my balls off. So I started working out in my basement at around grade 7. I was losing weight, I was improving, but I was still too anxious to enter an actual commercial gym. I was still a bit awkward in this phase, if you couldn't tell, but I was a lot more outgoing. But then, after around 2 or 3 years of training my basement, I worked up the courage, I got an actual gym, got a decent body, a snatched waist, I became known as the big arm guy, and my confidence skyrocketed. But how did I actually achieve this? Well, I'm going to give you a list of tips you can immediately apply to start specializing in arms, and while I will be focusing on arms, pretty much all the information generalizes to targeting any specific muscle. So if you want to specialize in shoulders or chest, this will all pretty much apply. For the first tip, you should be choosing the best exercises. And I know people have a lot of opinions on what exercises work the best, but everyone is different and you should be experimenting. I will give you a list of good exercises, but before that, I want you to use these qualifiers when choosing one. First, you should be choosing exercises that have a higher relative delayed onset muscle soreness. This means that you should be choosing exercises that make you more sore the next day when compared to other ones. Obviously, delayed onset muscle soreness isn't a perfect metric when viewed in isolation, but when you're comparing it to the soreness that is induced by other exercises, that's when it actually becomes very valuable. Second, you should actually be able to progress in it, because you probably know a lot of people like this. They've been curling dumbbells for maybe a month or two, and they're still doing 20 pounds. They're not actually progressing in the movement. Some movements, for whatever reason, you just aren't that good at progressing in, for genetics or just your attitude towards them, you don't like them. So you should be choosing exercises that you can consistently and reliably progressively overload in. For me personally, I've found that easy bar curls are very difficult to progress in, so I don't usually do them. Third, you should be choosing exercises that have a high SFR, which stands for stimulus to fatigue ratio. And what that means is it should be as stimulating on the muscle as possible while inducing as little fatigue as possible. So something like squatting would have a lot of fatigue, and something like a preacher curl would have very low fatigue. And for the next two, these are just intuitive. You should just be choosing exercises that feel good. They give you a big pump and they don't mess with your joints. As for what exercises you should start with when experimenting, I think for biceps, doing dumbbell curls when you move from a neutral to a supinated grip with slightly raised pinkies is a great one, alongside easy bar curls, straight bar cable curls, and preacher curls or cable preacher curls as is shown there. And another one you can do to get a really deep stretch, which is usually neglected in biceps, is to do incline curls. And as for triceps, skull crushers, either with an easy bar, a straight bar, dumbbells, or a Smith machine, all those are great, and push downs, either being a rope, a straight bar, or a V-bar, but personally I find that straight bar is kind of just insane. Those are some great starting points, but at the end of the day, there is no one answer, and you have to experiment to know what your body responds to best. And now that you got the exercises, choosing the best rep range. Well, there is no right answer, once again, but anything between 5 and 20, even up to 30 in a lot of cases, is good. And of course, I'm talking about hypertrophy, getting big arms. People think that you go super low rep range, it's all strength, you go super high, it's all endurance. But if you find a rep range that gives you the best burn, doesn't mess with your joints, and your muscle is the limiting factor, I think you just found the winning rep range. I mean, people say, oh, you have to do 12 reps. Well, sometimes that just doesn't feel good. To expand on the muscle being the limiting factor, that would be as opposed to something like fatigue, if you run out of breath, or something like your forearms giving out. So you have the exercises and you have the rep range, but how often are you actually supposed to be training your biceps and triceps? Well, different muscles can be trained at different frequencies. So you may notice that your chest and your quads take a lot more time to recover than your biceps, your triceps, or your calves. And due to this, you can usually only train your chest and your quads twice a week, but for your biceps and triceps, you can train them 3 to 4 times a week. Of course, everyone is different, so I would recommend going through the next week or two of your regular training routine and marking down when your biceps and triceps are recovered. You can then use this information to edit your current split so that you can add another day of biceps and another day of triceps. So for example, if you have push-pull legs, rest, you can actually swap legs and pull to do push legs, pull, rest. And what this does is it leaves a space here between push and pull, and another one here between push and pull. And that allows you to add biceps to your first push day and triceps to your last pull day. That's just an example, but if you do want to copy this, that could work for a lot of people. So now that you have pretty much the 3 most important parts out of the way, we're going to get more into the weird stuff. And we're going to start with specialization, where you train biceps and triceps earlier on in your workout than you otherwise would. Most people say, oh, I don't know why my biceps aren't getting big. I did 2 exercises for 3 sets. I mean, I thought they would grow by now. Well, these people are usually referring to a pull day where they did lat pull downs, bent over barbell rows, face pulls, maybe some rear delt, maybe some traps, and then they do biceps. You should be tinkering with your workouts and try to move your biceps and triceps exercises earlier on in your workout so you go into them more fresh. Another one is switching out old exercises. Let's say you have a tried and true exercise that you love. It checked every box before, it's been working great for you, you've put a lot of weight on in the past, but for whatever reason, recently, you've plateaued, or it feels worse, it messes with your joints more, you're not as sore the next day. What do you do when this happens? Well, you should swap it out with a different exercise for a while to resensitize yourself to it, and then reintroduce the movement later. So the next one, we all know that the stretch under a load is usually the most stimulating part of a movement. But for some reason, no one ever thinks to get a deep stretch when they're training biceps or triceps. And I get it, it's scary. I've seen the bicep tear videos, but this won't happen if you're doing it properly with a proper amount of weight. As you can see, Mike Israetel, leading most famous exercise scientist on the planet, doing a decline dumbbell curl. This is just absurd. So don't neglect the stretch. The next one is the biggest one, and that is genetics. You will have muscles that have better shape, insertions, and response to training than others. So you should be focusing on becoming the best you. Don't have this image in your head of someone with huge shoulders, decent arms, and a big chest, and then you think that's what you're going to look like. Everyone has different builds. So you should become the best you that you can. But of course, obviously, if you have lagging muscles, you can and should be bringing these up. Just to explain these pictures here, this is more plates, more dates. You can see he has a very shoulder dominant physique. Arnold has a very chest dominant physique. And then here Phil Heath has a very arm dominant physique. And of course, train hard, have good form, deload appropriately, progressively overload, track your progress, eat a bunch of protein, and be consistent. I'm making this video because I get asked a lot what I do for arms. Honestly, a lot of it does come down to genetics, but when I was younger, I specialized like I'm outlining now, and I built up that foundation to the point where now I don't have to do as much volume on them to maintain them, so I can put more time into shoulder work, one of my worst parts genetically. So getting big arms is epic, and you should do it.